Welcome back, everyone. This is Dave from Corn Productions, here to talk about Quantum Leap, Season 1, Episode 3, The Right Hand of God. The episode's description reads as follows. Sam leaps into a boxer that is owned by a covenant of nuns who need him to win a boxing match to finance their new chapel. Now, one of the interesting things about the first season is the lack of, I almost want to say, structure of Sam's leaps. Al never really gives Sam a clear-cut reason why Sam is there, though it soon becomes kind of obvious to Sam. But at no point is Al like, yeah, it seems like there's a 95-point blah 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 chance that you're here to do this. That never actually happens within the episode. In fact, Al is basically kind of useless in this episode up until almost the end. Sam doesn't learn the full history of what actually took place until almost the midpoint of the episode. The episode starts off with Sam narrating a recap of the events of the prior episode, with him saving a long-lost love. And then he leaps into a boxer, where he starts getting pummeled in the face. He gets knocked down, and the count is started. His coach is imploring him to get up. His coach, played by Alex Cohen. The late Alex Cohen, as it turns out. He died on January 6, 1995, at the age of 53. His last appearance in anything was in the 1994 film The Getaway, which was a Alec Baldwin and Kim Basinger vehicle. He has appearances in MacGyver, as well as the 1977 series Wonder Woman. Sam manages to get himself up in the nick of time. And the credits reveal that it is October 24th, 1974. The fight resumes, reluctantly on Sam's part. It unsurprisingly doesn't seem to be going very well for Sam, as all he's doing is taking shots at the body, but somehow he's still standing. He takes what can only be described as a defensive shot with his fist, and the other fighter goes down like a sack of bricks. Sam seems surprised by his own strength, and makes a move to apologize, because that's totally what a boxer would do. The ref tells him to go to his corner, as they count down to 10. And just like that, Sam Beckett has somehow won this fight. We cut to Sam, who is being ushered in to the locker room, followed by reporters who are eventually blocked out from the room. Sam seems shell-shocked and eventually spots himself in the mirror, looking like what you would figure a boxer would look like. Eventually, his coach asks him, "What happened? You almost lost our last fight together." As he's led back to what I guess is the examining table, Sam remarks, "I hardly touched him with that last punch. Strange how fast he went down." And he gets a weird sort of look from his coach. He's asked if he remembers where he is, and Sam's all like, "Why wouldn't I know where I am?" And his coach says, "Well, he hit you pretty good." And the other guy, an older guy, who I'm not sure if we actually see him for the rest of this episode. I'll have to keep an eye out. But anyway, he remarks, "Yeah, too good if you ask me." And Sam is like, "What do you mean, too good?" And then he catches on. He has this little look of recognition in his face, and he realizes that this fight was fixed. Sam starts to strip down, and he's in some kind of, looks like, I don't even know what he's wearing, but a pair of nuns walk in just at that moment, causing Sam to cover up out of embarrassment. The lead and younger nun is played by Michelle Joyner. Now I recognize the name. I didn't know why, because I don't personally recognize her from anything that I could recall off the top of my head. But when I looked into her credits, she has a credit on The X-Files during its 7th season titled Chimera. And I totally remember that episode. and I totally remember the character that she played in that episode, but I didn't recognize her at the time. Anyway, the nuns have bought Kid Cody's contract, which is Sam's character, by the way. Apparently, they got the contract after some guy named Duke died. And Sam rather feebly asks, well, what about my guys? And the other guy, that is not played by Alex Cohen, basically says that the nuns don't have a budget for them. Coach Gomez says that they will have that last drink some other time. And then he takes off, leaving him with the nuns and Sister Angela. Sister Angela says, I suppose things are happening rather quickly, or rather abruptly for you. And Sam says, he's getting used to it. Yeah, no kidding. We cut to Sister Angela and Sam touring what is basically right now a pile of rocks. She's describing her dreams of a chapel that will be open to the poor 24/7. Sam is polite but looks uncomfortable and eventually asks the question, what does this have to do with me? Sam's part in this is simple, at least from Sister Angela's point of view. All Sam has to do is win the next prize fight, and Sam insists that he's not very good, because he is, after all, not Kid Cody. Sister Angela points out that Sam won his last 10 fights, which were most likely fixed, given what we've already learned, and Sam insists that she shouldn't count on him so much. But Sister Angela says that she is counting on him. He will win the next fight, and they will get the money they need to build the chapel. Sam Beckett is less than convinced because he himself is not a boxer. But obviously something went wrong in the original history that prevented this from happening, otherwise Sam Beckett would not be here. Sister Angela insists that everything is going according to God's plan. And that's when Al shows up saying, yeah, but it's not going to Ziggy's plan, and he's wearing this crazy shiny orange coat, and he looks hungover. Al's appearance in this episode, his first one, is at the 7.22 mark. Roughly comparable to where he showed up in the last episode. Apparently, Ziggy thought his leap would land him in Texas, somewhere in the 1950s. But that is most definitely not the case, as this is the 70s. Sister Angela suggests that they would greatly appreciate if Kid Cody would move in with the nuns to save on housing and eating expenses. And Sam seems a little hesitant, starts saying, well, and Sister Angela takes this as, well, that's all I need. You can move right on in. It's done. Okay, that moment is a little bit annoying. You could at least wait until Sam agrees to it. And as it turns out later, Kid Cody has a girlfriend. So this is quite a bit presumptuous on the part of Sister Angela here. And I note, with some interest, that Al has absolutely no problem being in a church or near a church throughout this entire episode. Whereas in a later episode that aired in Season 3 titled Leap of Faith, Al has big time problems with being in a church due to his personal history. Which, given this episode, is a little bit of a retcon on Al's character. Now, in that episode it was used to great effect, but it does not change the fact that it is inconsistent with what is presented in this very episode. Sister Angela takes her leave, and Al asks, who does she remind you of? And Sam says, Ingrid Bergman. And Al responds, no. She reminds me of us, you, and me, trying to get the funds together for the imaging chamber. That was our dream. That was our chapel. Sam is annoyed because he's in Sacramento, California in 1972, a long way from Ziggy's projections. And Al says, it's just an unscheduled stop. And Sam points out they are all unscheduled stops. The only thing he's scheduled to do is get his brains beaten in. And Al suggests, hey, don't fight. And Sam asks, what if that's what I'm supposed to do here? What if I'm supposed to win this prize fight so that Sister Angela could get her chapel? Al starts laughing and says, well, then he's in big trouble. And I can't help but note that Al doesn't have the hand link. He's not looking for information on why Sam could be there. What is Al doing here? Al is pretty darn useless within the course of this episode, only proving his value at being there at all towards the end. Anyway, Al decides to take a little bit of a nap on the floor. Sam asks Al if he's boring him, and Al responds that he has a neighbor who sleeps all day and then rebuilds his car engine at night, allowing for Al to have absolutely no sleep at all, which is why he looks so terrible during the course of this episode. We cut to Sam going up a flight of stairs outside when he's interrupted by a henchman, I guess you could call him, and he says that Jake wants to see him. Sam is led into a car with Jake, a old mobster-looking guy, and that's how he acts throughout the episode, and he's played by Guy Stockwell, who happens to be Dean Stockwell's brother. He sadly passed away on February 6th, 2002, at the age of 68. Jake asks him what the heck was he doing in the ring the other day. And Sam says, oh, nothing, what do you mean? And Jake responds, that's what it looked like, nothing. And Sam's like, I won, didn't I? And Jake laughs, saying, I didn't know you had a sense of humor. Because, of course, Sam was supposed to laugh. He puts his hand over Sam's mouth to get him to stop talking. They turn up the volume on the radio, and it's an advertisement for Ali versus George Foreman. Jake suggests that he's going to put some money on that fight, but not as much as he's going to put on the fight with Sam. Sam quietly recommends that that's not a good idea. And Jake Edwards, Mr. Edwards, is a little perturbed by the statement, asking, what are you trying to tell me? And Sam suggests he was thinking about retiring. And Sam makes a On the Waterfront reference, a movie starring Marlon Brando, way back in the day. I think it was in the 60s. The reference is apropos of what's going on in this scene. Jake says, in a menacing tone, that quitting right now would be a bad idea, and his associate takes out a gun. And Sam asks, you'd kill a man just because he wants to quit? And Jake is offended by this comment. I don't kill people, I just blow out people's kneecaps. What do you take me for? And Sam agrees, quitting right now is a bad idea. And then Jake tells him he's going to go in the tank. He's going to take a dive against Joe Tiger. Oh boy! Sam makes his way to his apartment. And how he found that? Not really sure, to be honest with you. But he makes a reference to the cliches of what's going on and says if he has a roommate, he probably has cauliflower ears. He calls out a greeting. And a rather attractive woman runs out, calling him honey and giving him a kiss. She doesn't look like she has cauliflower ears. She looks kind of good to me. Her name is Dixie, and she's played by Terry Copley, who has 28 credits to her name, including a very recent one. She has a turn on Blossom, Hunter, and 3 appearances on The Love Boat. Dixie apologizes for not being able to make the fight, but her boss wouldn't let her off work, and it is implied pretty strongly that Dixie is a stripper. Dixie, after opening a bed from the wall, starts to put money that she earned into a pink pillow, saying that they are going to need to save for the donut shop that they eventually want to get. And Dixie makes an offhand reference of needing $20,000. Because Cody can't fight forever, and Dixie can't be a stripper forever. It's getting to the point where the mountains are coming to Mohammed, as she puts it, meaning she's getting older. And Sam says with a laugh that she looks pretty good to him. Yep, me too. And I will say that as a 11, 12-year-old boy, when I first saw this episode, I was pretty impressed with Dixie back then too. Sam eventually has to have an awkward conversation. He tells him that because of the contract being inherited by the nuns, that they want him to go live with them to save on living expenses. This doesn't exactly go over well with Dixie, and that's one of the reasons why Sister Angela asking and not letting Sam answer was a bit presumptuous because of this situation. That even if Sam had answered, he didn't know about Dixie at this time. But still, they're living in this apartment, so is there any particular reason why Sam couldn't just continue living here? I guess it would be on Dixie's dime, but she doesn't seem to be bothered by that at this time. And Sam makes a rather honest statement. He doesn't know what to say. But they own him. And Dixie says, "But honey, don't I own you?" And she proceeds to take off her shirt, while Amazing Grace plays. Cute. We cut to Sam getting ready to go to sleep at the chapel. We still hear Amazing Grace playing. Sam lays down and starts singing Amazing Grace. And then he hears Al snoring on the floor. Okay, two things here. One, how did Sam not notice Al sleeping on the floor? Or did Al suddenly materialize after Sam laid down, which makes no sense? Second, Al is sleeping in the imaging chamber with the Hollow program running. I know he's pretty sleep deprived, but doesn't he have like some kind of office or something? Maybe with a couch or a mattress that he can sleep on? Something that has to be more comfortable than the floor that he's sleeping on. Unless he dragged a mattress in there, which, there's other people who work at the project. Wouldn't they question that? And isn't that more effort than is really needed? Secondly, this series makes references to the budget problems of Quantum Leap. And here, Al is wasting budgetary resources on running the Hollow program so that he can be in contact with Sam to sleep. He's wasting my taxpayer money to sleep in the imaging chamber. Well, okay, this was set in 1999, and actually, I was working then, so I still would have been paying taxes back then. Yet I was only like 18, 17, so that probably wasn't a big deal to me back then. But, my dad was paying taxes. He had a solid job at the time and still does. So he's wasting my dad's money sleeping in the imaging chamber. Alright, so beyond the rant that I just went on, the scene is set up kind of oddly, to put it mildly, for reasons I've already specified. And if your suggestion is maybe Sam just came into the room and Al was in a position where maybe he wasn't seen right away, except when Sam discovers him, he's looking in the very direction that Sam was initially looking at when he laid down in that bed. So, if he were there, Sam totally would have seen him. And he reacts later when Al starts snoring like he didn't. Anyway, I'm going to move on from that now. And by the way, Al still doesn't seem to have the handling that he carries in most of the episodes. I don't see him using it even once. But he says to Sam that, barring some unknown variables, the best shot for Sam quantum leaping out of this situation is to win the championship and get the nurse's chapel. And Sam goes on to say that he will give him a few unknown variables. For instance, he's out of shape, he doesn't know how to fight, so on and so forth. And Al offers him to train, because apparently he was a boxer in his day. Al dances around him, throwing punches, and eventually Sam is like, Al, hit my hand. And of course it goes straight through. Al's use as a trainer, a boxing trainer, is limited to non-existent, just like his function mostly in this episode. Not to say that his presence isn't an entertaining one, nonetheless. Sam starts to leave, and Al's like, where are you going? Sam is like, to get a real trainer. And Al takes umbrage at this remark. But yeah, the thing is here, Sam is right. Al cannot help him. Al is left to pretend box in the dark. We cut to Sam in a bar with his former coach, and he's asking why his former coach won't train him. And it's simple. He's tired of coaching players that take dives. And Sam asks, well, what if I don't? And the coach says, that's just the booze talking. And Sam convinces him, or tries to, that nope, he actually means it. Which is when Jake ends up on the scene, being vaguely threatening and annoying, and basically talking about how the coach was the best diver he'd ever known, which draws a look from Sam. They notice on the TV a streaker, which I'm sure will in no way come back in the plot later on. And Jake, after being menacing, or trying to be, takes off. And the coach asks Sam, do you mean what you say? Are you going to do this full out? And Sam says he will. And just like that, Sam has his trainer. Cut to a sparring match with Sam and pretty much every main character that's been in Sam's corner up to this point in the episode. And this sparring match does not go well. Sam ends up on the mat after getting punched in the face. He's knocked unconscious, and his coach eventually just throws a bucket of ice on him to revive him. The coach tells him he knows what's going on. And Sam's like, you do? And the coach replies, you haven't had a straight fight in a year. You don't need a trainer. What you need is a miracle. Cut to an inspiring Rocky-like training montage, complete with jump roping, which Sister Angela can't help but get involved in. I mean, really, who could blame her? When we exit the montage, Sister Angela and Sam are walking alongside the road. Well, Sam is anyway, he's supposed to be running, while she follows along on a bike. And eventually, Sam begs for a 5-minute break and asks, why is this chapel so important? She proceeds to tell a story of how her family died in a fire, but she was spared for some unknown reason. She was shuffled around from uncle to uncle and eventually ended up on the streets. And she began to hate everybody, even herself and even God. Eventually, she was found by a nun who took her in. She didn't save her life, but she saved her soul. And it was at that moment that she decided that one day she would build a chapel for people like herself to save those like herself. The quiet moment between them ends when Sister Angela declares that time is up on Sam's break. More inspiring montage where Sam Beckett is starting to look a little less feeble in his attempts. Eventually, he's being watched by an approving Al, who's wearing a fancy white suit. And as it turns out, Al actually has information for Sam. 30 minutes into the episode, Al is finally telling Sam what actually happened in the original history. And as it turns out, Cody took a dive. Wow, I'm shocked. And Sister Angela never got her chapel. Oh, and look, Al is using the hand link for the first time this episode. And Sam says, well, wait a minute. All you're giving me is what happened. I am here to change all that. And Al asks, so you're going to beat Tiger Joe in the championship? And Sam says, why not? And Al says, I'll tell you why not. You're holding your left too low. And apparently that's what Gomez keeps telling him. Sam eventually gives Al some advice on how he could solve his problem with his noisy neighbor. And it's to tape the noise from the night and play it back the next morning to interrupt his neighbor's sleeping patterns. And Al seems surprised by that solution. Eventually, Sam asks him if he's going to be at the fight, and Al said he would try. And then Al just disappears after Sam turns back. No goodbye, no door opening, nothing. He's just gone. Just like in the previous episode, they still don't have the door effect that they would typically use throughout the rest of the series. We have another bar scene where Jake wanders in and suggests, or rather says to Sam that he's heard he's been training for real, like he's not planning on taking a dive. Jake makes a crack about getting religion, which gets Sam to his feet, ready to pop Jake in the face. But his coach holds him back. Sam makes a proposal. How about Sam call the round instead of Jake? And we don't know what Sam is talking about exactly, but eventually, towards the end of the episode, we would find out exactly what Sam's plan is. We cut to a scene with Sam and Dixie. And Sam wants to put money, their life savings that Dixie has been putting in the pink little pillow, betting the round. Dixie is skeptical. And part of this plan is for Dixie to go streaking. Dixie asks why he can't ask Angela to go streaking. Because you can't ask a nun to go streaking. And Dixie replies, just a tramp like me. Ouch. Sam implores her. Her streaking is the only chance that he has to win. She needs him. And after the fight, it'll be nothing but donuts. Sugar-filled jelly donuts. Well, I personally prefer Boston cream, Sam, but you do you. Later, Sam finds Sister Angela in the chapel. Or somewhere. The place where you go to pray. You know, the place where there's a bunch of seating. The church. Yeah, that. Anyway, Sister Angela is not happy. And it's because Jake stopped by with some money. And apparently Jake has rejected the deal. He wants to call the rounds, not Sam, or rather Cody. Sister thought she was getting a champion. Instead, she's getting a cheat. And she's lost her faith, despite the fact that Sam is trying to get her not to, is trying to get her to believe in him. Because if she doesn't, then he doesn't stand a chance. And the fight begins. Sam gets instructions from the ref. Joe Tiger makes a vaguely threatening comment, and Sam looks for Al and does not see him. He takes a look at Sister Angela, who still has no faith, and looks sad. Initially, the fight does not go well. Sam is getting pummeled. And just like that, not even 5 seconds of the match, he's on the ground, which seemingly confirms everything that Sister Angela is afraid of and thinks is going on. But Sam Beckett rises like the phoenix from the ashes. The coach, or rather the ref, asks him where he's at, and Sam makes a joke about being at Saskatchewan before saying Sacramento because he's screwing with the ref a little bit. And apparently this is actually a normal thing in boxing. And if the boxer is screwing with him, the ref knows he's actually okay. I don't remember where I read that from, but apparently this is the case. This is a realistic detail about boxing. The fight resumes. Sister Angela has become excited again. She's seemingly surprised that Sam is suddenly doing better. She's into it. She's clapping. Just like that, she has her faith back. But then things go the other way, and he starts getting pummeled. And as he's hugging it out with his opponent who's pummeling away at him, he looks at Dixie and gives her the signal. And the signal is, of course, to get naked and go streaking. This apparently distracts his opponent long enough for Sam to knock him down. Jake, who's just seen a naked woman, turns and notices that things have changed, and not in his favor. And that is when Al arrives. Sam excitedly says he didn't think he was going to make the fight, and Al said he wouldn't miss it for the world. Sam thinks that he has won the fight, but as it turns out, Joe Tiger is getting up. The fight resumes, this time with Al showing him where to throw his punches. And eventually, Sam lands a really good one and just stares at Joe Tiger in a really goofy fashion as he goes down, as he wins the fight. Sam celebrates. He raises his arms in victory. Sister Angela, with her fellow nuns, also celebrates, as she has officially gotten her chapel. In the locker room, Dixie and Sam and his coach are all celebrating. But that's not all. Sam didn't just win this bout. He won a big-time bet, betting all his life savings on a round on the Foreman Ali fight, betting the round and winning a bunch of money. And apparently this is what Sam was trying to get Jake to bet on. And as Jake enters the scene, he mentions that he didn't believe Sam, so he didn't do it. He's seemingly disappointed that Jake did not follow through on their agreement. But Roscoe, one of Jake's associates, now owes Dixie a lot of money. $50,000 or $48,000 to be exact. 8 for Jake, 20 for the chapel and the nuns, and 20 for Kid Cody and herself. And Sam says, if that's not enough, you're just going to have to go and kill me. Now, I have a question here. Since the whole chapel was riding on Sam winning this fight, there was obviously a cash sum for winning. And a percentage of that was supposed to go to the nuns, having the nuns owning his contract. So Sam winning this fight means that they already got their chapel. And this is just $20,000 additional money on that for whatever. But I'm actually kind of curious. Did it matter if Sam won this fight? Maybe he loses and the nuns still get the chapel with the $20,000. Or maybe not. I don't know. We're not really clear on the details of how much money the nurses were going to get from Cody winning this fight in the first place. So we really can't be certain what the nuns actually needed to build this chapel. But at any rate, Jake accepts the terms of this agreement and takes Roscoe out of the scene, saying that Roscoe owes them quite a bit of money. Dixie goes along to collect the money, and Sam tells her to hurry back because he knows he's going to be leaping soon. Sister Angela comes in and talks about how her faith is restored. She got her chapel, and Sam Beckett was the one that got it for her. As they celebrate, Sam leaps and ends up holding a pig in the farm somewhere. A squealing pig. Oh, this should be fun. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is where the episode ends. This is actually my favorite episode up to this point in the rewatch videos that I've done so far. I would say it's probably third overall on this season of my favorites. This is pretty good, but there's a couple episodes that I rate slightly higher than this one. The next time we meet for one of these rewatches, we will be talking about How the Test Was Won, the 5th episode of this season. Now, I remember being kind of down on that episode. It's definitely not one of my favorites, but we'll see when I rewatch the video if it's aged better or worse for me. So check that out when that comes out. Probably, I'm actually not sure when, because new episodes of This Is Us are coming back, and I will be doing those 3 episodes. I don't know that I'm going to have time to do additional videos, so we'll see. It might be at least a couple of weeks before we see another one of these rewatches. But anyway, that's all I got for you today for this video. If you like this video and want to support the channel, there are a number of ways to do so. You can follow me on Twitter at Core Productions. You can join my Core Productions Facebook group. You can buy me a coffee, which is a new way to support content creators such as myself. You can buy something from the Core Productions store on Zazzle. And of course, you can like, share, and comment on this video, as well as subscribing to my channel. This is Dave from Core Productions, signing off.